Hello you bearded bastards, and welcome to another of my Short Fortress episodes. Now today's episode's going to be a little bit different than usual. Today we're going to feature no Dwarf Fortress gameplay at all. This week we're going to be looking at some descriptions from in the game. Descriptions of forgotten beasts, to be precise. And if you don't already know, forgotten beasts in Dwarf Fortress are a type of creature that lives deep under the earth. In caverns, typically, and if you dig down too deep, they tend to regularly attack you. Now, these creatures are completely randomly generated, and they can look like all sorts of horrible things. A giant muscular fire-breathing sloth, a shaggy furred tortoise perhaps, that sprays poisonous gas. It can really look like anything. And I'll tell you, that really gets my imagination going. In fact, one of my favorite things to do in Dwarf Fortress is to just draw forgotten beasts. And so this week, that's what I did. Plus, this gives me a chance to just kind of talk to you guys, which I don't really get to do that often. You know, normally I'm in the middle of playing the game, I gotta focus on what I'm doing, make a nice story for all you, which I know you like, but then you don't have time for my witty commentary, which might be a good thing. We'll find out by the end of this episode, won't we? Anywho, let's dive right in here. We will start playing because I've already created a new world, and we'll head into Legends mode. Here we are. Now let's take a look here at historical figures, and we can see a whole bunch of creatures here. Bronze Colossus, Female Rock, Hydra, all very interesting, sure, but they don't have that randomly generated twist. And so we're gonna look down here, just till we get to the Forgotten Beasts, and here we are. Now, it should be noted before we get into this that I've already drawn all the Forgotten Beasts for this episode, and I'm recording this afterwards, just so I had time to analyze each of them, figure out what they're going to look like, that sort of stuff, and so that I have something interesting to talk about. Now, I went down this list here starting from the very first Forgotten Beast that I encountered, and then just kept going. I did not skip a single one. And really, I think I was able to give each one their own unique twist, which I think is kind of lucky, honestly. Sometimes you get a lot of boring ones, but not this time. Okay, let's see here. We're starting off with Smoonstew's Sangnasenbaks. Smoonstew's Slither Nightmare was a forgotten beast. It was the only one of its kind. A great, hairy, six-legged sauropod. It is ravening. Its cinnamon hair is long and straight. Beware its deadly blood. Smoonstew was associated with jealousy and caverns. In a time before time, Smoonstew began wandering the depths of the world. Now that's pretty terrifying, huh? A sauropod, if you didn't know, is something like a brontosaurus, one of those long-necked dinosaurs. Plus, this one has a shaggy coat, kind of like a woolly mammoth or something. I thought that was pretty neat. You can picture the caverns shaking as it plods along, scanning for prey. Yeah, I thought this one was pretty okay. A fairly average-looking forgotten beast in my opinion, but a decent way to get us started. Now, it says it has deadly blood. I haven't tangled too many forgotten beasts in a while, and I forget what that means exactly. I'm pretty sure it means if you cut it open and its blood gets on one of your dwarves, then there can be a number of effects, which are also, I believe, to be randomly generated. It probably would have helped if I looked into this stuff before I started talking about it, but here we are. It'll be a surprise for the future. Doesn't that sound fun? Fantastic. Next up, we have Stuzang Tamsusador Dak. Stuzang, the submerged deep of paddles, was a forgotten beast. It was the only one of its kind. And it should also be noted that each of these forgotten beasts is the only one of its kind. None of them are part of a larger species, which is kind of a shame, but hey, whatever. Stuzang was an enormous three-eyed crab. It has large mandibles and it squirms and fidgets. Its cinnamon exoskeleton is rough and cracked. Beware its poisonous bite. Stuzang was associated with water, depravity, whatever, and caverns. In a time before time, Stuzang began wandering the depths of the world. Alright, now this beast here is a crab with a poisonous bite. So if it managed to clamp its enormous mandibles down on a dwarf and not eviscerate it completely, it would in fact poison that dwarf. And I'm fairly sure Forgotten Beast poison is randomly generated as well. So it could be an effect like a bee sting, or it could basically turn your dwarf into a pile of mush immediately, which I goddamn love. You could just picture a group of dwarves walking along the banks of some underground lake, and an enormous claw reaches up and grabs one of them, stuffing the dwarf into its cavernous maw, poisoning them in the process. Man, I'll tell you, I love these things. Next, Paden, the Cavernous Mites. Now that's interesting. I only just realized that, like these two past ones, Smoonstew and Stuzang, they have these long, confusing names. But Paden has in quotes after its name, the Cavernous Mites. Why is that? Very interesting. Well, anywho, the Cavernous Mites was a forgotten beast. Also, this one's not referred to as Paden in its description. It's referred to as the Cavernous Mites. That is interesting, and I'm really not too sure why that would be. Anywho, the Cavernous Mites was an enormous feathered leech. It has a round shell and it has a bloated body. Its gray feathers are long and sparse. Beware its poisonous gas. The Cavernous Mites was associated with water, disease, and caverns. An enormous feathered leech. Truly terrifying. Now, poisonous gas is a very dangerous ability for a Forgotten Beast to have. Again, the effects that it has are completely randomly generated, I believe. And I remember this one time I had encountered a Forgotten Beast underground, a gassy one, like the Cavernous Mites here. My dwarves rushed in, killed the creature, no problem whatsoever. And then days later I looked at them and my entire military was blind. Not a single eye amongst them. But it didn't really seem to affect them that much, so hey, whatever. But I assume there can be worse effects. Another interesting tidbit, if you've never seen a leech move, it's very fascinating, both swimming in the water and out of the water. In the water, it kind of undulates, very graceful, and then out of the water, it's kind of like an inchworm, very creepy. So yeah, Google that, have some fun, learn something new. Ugh, leeches. They give me the creeps, but I do respect them. Anyways, next up we have Wary, and in quotations next to it says Wary. That is odd. Anywho, let's take a look. Wary was a Forgotten Beast. It was the only one of its kind, an enormous humanoid composed of snow. It has a twisting, jointed trunk, and it has a bloated body, where he was associated with water, torture, and caverns. Now, here's something, it says this creature has a twisting, jointed trunk, and for the longest time this really confused me in Dwarf Fortress. The term trunk. At first glance you would think like an elephant trunk, right? And so I did too. And then I saw some conversations online of people referring to the trunk in a Forgotten Beast as the body of the beast. It's kind of an alternate term for a torso, so I got really confused. But I did find a reference on the Dwarf Fortress wiki talking about how trunk was, in fact, the torso of a creature, and so for the longest time that's what I took it as meaning. But at this point I'm fairly certain that it does in fact mean an elephant-like snout, because I was fighting a Forgotten Beast at one point, aimed an attack at its head, and it managed to make its trunk sail off in an arc, and the creature was still living. So I couldn't very well have knocked off its torso and the creature was still walking around absolutely fine. So yes, the great debate is finally settled. It may have been a debate that only I was having, but it's settled nonetheless. You can see this creature here is in fact chasing an elk bird through the caverns, this small hapless creature here. And I took a little bit of liberty with this one and threw some ice crystals on his back because I thought it would be totally boring otherwise. I did debate going with kind of a snowman-like configuration with this creature, but I'm kind of glad I didn't because that would have been totally corny. But I still think I could have made it work. Whatever. Oh, and on the subject of elk birds, this music you're hearing right now, this was done by the composer known as Elkbird. He gets a lot of his inspiration from Dwarf Fortress, and so I decided to use some of his music for this video. I figured different kind of video, different kind of music, why the hell not? You can look him up on Bandcamp, I'll put his page down in the description below. And that's enough of this beast. Next up we have Baru. Baru was a Forgotten Beast. It was the only one of its kind. A gigantic stegosaurid with external ribs. It has a pair of fan-like antennae, and it undulates rhythmically. Its eyes glow spring green. Beware its fire. Baru was associated with depravity, whatever, and caverns. Our first fire-breathing Forgotten Beast. These ones are extremely dangerous. Fire is not randomly generated, but that does not matter at all, because it's always extremely dangerous. One burst of fire is going to set any dwarf aflame if they're not holding a shield, as well as set their surroundings on fire. Mushrooms, cave moss, that sort of stuff. A single burst of fire can set an entire cavern level on fire, and that blaze will last quite some time. Very extremely dangerous. Now, as I've mentioned in my past videos, Mrs. Kruggsmash does all the coloring in my pictures, like this one here. And I think she does really swell work, honestly. She has never seen herself as an artist, and she's really only doing this to help me out, which I really appreciate. But her skill has improved so much, I mean, it's really astounding. For someone who doesn't really enjoy doing art, all this lighting here, the fire, and she says she's not an artist. Come now. Just goes to show you, any of you non-artsy people out there who can't draw or color or anything like that, pick up some crayons, pick up a pen, do something. You got it, dude. I believe in you. Anywho, let's see what we have next. Next up we have Meng Ugoshukur. Meng, the Hollow Wave. Meng the Hollow Wave was a Forgotten Beast. It was the only one of its kind. A gigantic one-eyed serpent. It has a curling trunk and it belches and croaks. Its black scales are small and close-set. Beware its fire. Meng was associated with water, chaos, and caverns. Another fire-breathing beast. Now, I got a little cute on this one here, just because I didn't really put a mouth on the creature. I figured it's gonna have a long serpentine body, and it could just kind of continue past the head into a trunk that it would breathe fire out of. I don't tend to like to stray too far from what the creature actually looks like in Dwarf Fortress, according to its raws anyways, like what the game actually thinks they look like. And I'm sure that in the game this creature actually does have a mouth, and that's where the fire is coming from, but I figured this was too good. I had to make the fire come out of that long curling snout. You know, little artistic liberty there. Also, it says that Meng belches and croaks. Just picture this creature slithering along through the stalactites. It looks down, spots some prey, sprays out a gout of fire, burps, croaks a couple times, trying to reignite its snout fire. Tiny screaming dwarf bodies aflame in the caverns below. Oh yeah. And we move on. Next up we have Ulspa. Wow, that's a bad one. Nerzungatkust. Wow, that does not roll off the tongue. It should be noted too that I do a lot of editing in these episodes, and I almost never say these names right off the bat. I'm usually sitting here for a couple minutes. You know how it is. Ulspa Nerzungatkusk. Oh my god. Zungaktust. Oh my god. Gatkust. Holy hell. Ulspa Nerzungatkust. There we have it. Ulspa Wicked Mirrors. Ulspa was a forgotten beast, the only one of its kind. A gigantic noseless armadillo. It has a round shell and it squirms and fidgets. Its ivory hair is short and even. Beware its noxious secretions. Ulspa was associated with nightmares and caverns. Now look at this creature here. I'm a big fan of how this one turned out. Now, if you've never seen a Glyptodon, or what the hell's it called? A Doedicurus? I believe, something like that. Some sort of an Ice Age creature that looked very similar to this. You should definitely look that up immediately, because this creature is almost a spot-on copy of that. I figured a noseless armadillo, that seems like a rather inoffensive forgotten beast. And so we have him here just kind of grazing on some cavern moss, a couple mushrooms nearby. Maybe he'll move on to those next. Who knows? But I can imagine if this creature sensed prey nearby, it would run off in a fury, bumbling through the caverns, its rocky shell scraping against the walls. Now it says this creature has noxious secretions, which I did not depict in this picture. I'm not too sure what that is, honestly. Some sort of a dripping? A smelly dripping, perhaps? I mean, I know there's poisonous gas. Is it similar to that? I don't know. Again, it would really have done me some good to look this stuff up beforehand, but here we are. More surprises for the future. Nothing wrong with that. An interesting beastie. Next up we have Alas Shagatmeng. Alas Hornlash. That's a pretty cool name. Alas Hornlash was a forgotten beast, the only one of its kind. An enormous marten with external ribs. It has 2 long hanging tails and it has a bloated body. Its moss green feathers are patchy. Beware its poisonous sting. Alas was associated with water, chaos, and caverns. Patchy feathers, external ribs, which I do not like drawing, honestly. External ribs, there's not really a good reference for that anywhere in nature. If you know of any, please let me know. But I looked all over the place. And so, essentially what it boils down to is a rib cage outside the torso here. Which kind of works. I probably could have done something a little bit better with that, but here we are. Patchy feathers, so you can see a good amount of its flesh here, its big ol' bloated stomach, as well as some little finger protrusions out from the tops of its wings. A little bit of a double chin action in this superhero leg pose here. A couple problems with this one is you can't see its hanging tails, but no matter. And you can't see its sting either, which I don't know if that really works to its benefit or to its detriment. We as the viewer don't know where this creature is stinging from. Is the sting referring to its claws? Can it kind of scrape you and inject venom that way? Or does it perhaps have a stinger somewhere down in these feathers here? Could it latch onto its prey, then a stinger juts out from its undercarriage here? That's a pretty terrifying thought. And unfortunately, or fortunately perhaps, we'll never find out where its stinger is. Kind of a boring forgotten beast. Next we have Quothest Imiocel. Ooh, that was the first try right there, that was pretty good. Quothest Rumored Devil. An interesting name. Quothest was a forgotten beast. It was the only one of its kind. A towering, one-eyed iguanodont. It has 3 short tails and it squirms and fidgets. Its slate gray scales are jagged and set far apart. Beware its deadly spittle. Quothest was associated with water, treachery, and caverns. And here it is, this dopey looking creature here, with its one eye, slime dripping from its nose and mouth. The deadly spittle. I mean, how dangerous could this thing be? It looks kinda dorky, honestly. Which is exactly what I say every time I lose half my army to a forgotten beast. I'm sure it's plenty deadly. Its spittle, I think, is randomly generated as well, so it can have any sort of malady associated with it. Blinding dwarves, making their skin rot off, that sort of stuff. And I've gotta say, I really like the way Mrs. Kruggsmash colored this one. These dark bands on its back here. You know, it actually reminds me a lot of, well, there's a creature from the game Monster Hunter called an Aptonoth. I believe that's what it's called anyways. Kind of a big dinosaur looking thing. That's what it reminds me of anyways. That is a fantastic game. If you're looking for inspiration, go right there. Hard as hell, but I'm a big fan. Both me and Mrs. K. That's probably where she got her inspiration, honestly. Let's go ask. Here, 1 second. Mrs. K, I'm at. Remember that iguanodon monster that you colored? It had like one eye.
Yeah.
Did you do that because like in Monster Hunter there's those... It took like 2 hits to kill.
Yeah. No, it was just a picture that I saw.
Okay. She was not inspired by those creatures. It was just close to a picture she saw online. So, that's settled. Anywho, let's move on to the next one. Next up we have Mephio. It's a boring name. Mephaio was a forgotten beast. It was the only one of its kind. A great raccoon with external ribs. It has a spiral shell and it has a bloated body. Its blue hair is unkempt. Beware its poisonous vapors. Mephaio was associated with depravity and caverns. And there he is, the shaggy bastard. You know, I really don't like drawing shells on creatures that don't normally seem like they'd have a shell. Like, I don't know, I guess your mind goes to like a snail shell or something like that. I guess I could have done like a turtle shell or something. Actually, that would be interesting. Why didn't I think of that? I could have done like a turtle shell. What a dope. Anyways, so Mephaio has this big spiral shell coming off his posterior, which he can kind of retract into, which I thought would be kind of neat. Just picture his little head and claws coming out of the hole. He certainly looks fierce. You know, after I drew it, I realized that this creature here reminds me a lot of that little squirrel thing from the movie Ice Age. Completely unintentional. A little bit of slobber coming out of his mouth there. Now, note here that it says Mephaio was associated with depravity and caverns. To this date, I'm not 100% what that means exactly. It tends to say similar things in the description of gods in Dwarf Fortress, like blah 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 is a dwarven god of fire. It is associated with fire, volcanoes, and blacksmiths, or something like that. These things aren't gods, they're actual mortal creatures in this world. Are there actually beings out there that treat these creatures as gods? Watch it be some common knowledge and I'm just a total noob. I wouldn't doubt that at all. What kind of creature would worship this forgotten beast? I mean, I know I've never seen a dwarf worshipping a forgotten beast as a god, unless it's just that rare, which I suppose I wouldn't doubt. Anywho, a ferocious forgotten beast. On to the next. Oh wow, it's a painful looking one. Aurelithia, oh my lord. Aurelithimaceae vera. Wow, my god, that's a lovely name, really. It's not an easy name to pronounce initially, but once you get it, it's really kind of satisfying to say. Aurelithimaceae vera. Yeah, I like that. Let's take a look. Translated, it means the royal night mole of clams. That is an awful name. It was the only one of its kind, a towering, three-eyed flycatcher, which, to be sure, I was extremely excited when I first saw that because I was thinking like a Venus flycatcher. It turns out that a flycatcher is just a kind of a lame little bird. It has a short trunk and it squirms and fidgets. Its light brown feathers are long and broad. Beware its fire. The royal night mole was associated with water, thraldom, and caverns. A smaller forgotten beast, I would imagine. So in order to make up for that, I imagine this creature just spreads its fire all over the place while flying above, nice and safe. I will also note that this creature does in fact have 3 eyes, and these ones here that you see are the ones on the right side of its head and the one in the center of its head, with the third being on the other side. If you didn't know that, this creature would look awful strange. A ferocious creature, small but deadly. I find it odd that 2 of the fire-breathing creatures that we've seen so far are associated with water. Why not, like, fire or something? Magma, perhaps? I don't know, just throwing out ideas. And why are these creatures associated with these strange things anyways? Thraldom? Like slavery? Very odd. I guess if you found them in-game, you can interpret it some way. Like if the Royal Night Mole came to your fortress, you could say that is enslaving your dwarves or something. I don't know. You could really just let your imagination go wild with it, really. Anywho, next up we have Taknu Borausman, which sounds like a legit last name. Hello, sir. My name is Taknu Borausman. Does your fortress have need of a forgotten beast today? Almost never. This creature's name translates to mind shadows. That's interesting. Imagine your miners down, breaking open into a cavern, and this creature comes out into your tunnels, attacking your fortress. That would almost literally be, in fact, a mind shadow. I like that. Let's take a look. Taknu was a forgotten beast. A huge, 3-eyed possum. It has thin wings of stretched skin and it belches and croaks. Its slate gray hair is very curly. Beware its webs. So a flying possum that shoots webs. Let me tell you, web shooting forgotten beasts are no fun at all. Or if you're a long-time Dwarf Fortress player, they are in fact a ton of fun. These web shooters, I used to laugh them off back in the day. Webs, what are some webs? But if your warriors get stuck in webs, they can't do anything. They'll just lay there and wait to get killed by whatever forgotten beast shot them out in the first place. It's incredibly deadly. Oh, I'll tell you what, reading all these forgotten beast descriptions gets me so excited to start a new season of my show. I so badly want to start a brand new fortress in a brand new world populated with thousands of forgotten beasts. Man, that's gonna be great. And we'll see all kinds of horrible creatures just like these ones. Man, oh man, I am excited. It's gonna be great, I'm telling you. But anyways, next beast please. Next up we have Asingek Dakotu Spos. It's like you're spitting out a mouthful of rocks. Asingek Dakotu Spos Urer. There we go. Asingek paddledfish's The Abyss of Moistening was a forgotten beast. A great humanoid composed of black opal. It has a long hanging tail and it squirms and fidgets. Beware its webs. Alright, now I will note that some of these forgotten beasts were actually colored by myself. Turns out that these things are really a giant pain in the ass to color, and so I gave Mrs. Kruggsmash a hand this week. I say this not to get credit for myself, but only because I don't want Mrs. Kruggsmash to get blamed for my shoddy coloring skills. Now, I was actually pretty excited to color this thing here, Black Opal. If you don't know what that looks like, I'd say Google it. It's very cool looking, and I really did not do it justice here. I used colored pencils too, just for the hell of it. And it was pretty fun, but it took a long time to get it done. Pain in the ass, really. And I ended up just using crayons in the background. Got the job done. Now imagine this creature here. You're a dwarf going through the caverns deep underground. You hear a waterfall, a river flowing in the distance. Up ahead you see what appears to be a giant mound of black opal. And then you hear the shifting of stone. And you realize it's the mound of black opal itself. Then you see the eyes glaring over its shoulder. This creature also sprays webs like that last one. It's almost certain that no dwarf would survive that encounter. Another terrifying facet is that this creature is associated with torture. I'd hate to know what happens if it got a hold of a dwarf. Ugh. Anywho, next up we have Vesh Serakmesog. Ooh, I like that one. Serakmesog. Yeah, big fan. Vesh Echoed Tumor. Oh, we have a bit more information here too. Very good. Vesh Echoed Tumor was a forgotten beast. A towering beakless jay. It has a square shell and it has a gaunt appearance. Its mauve taupe feathers are patchy. Beware its poisonous sting. Now this one here is a bit different just because it does have some events associated with it. And yes, that also means that none of those previous forgotten beasts have ever encountered another intelligent being. Now it says here that Vesh fought with the dwarf Tun Hollowmetal. That dwarf did survive, and then 20 years later, Vesh actually devoured a dog and a dwarf that belonged to that same dwarven group. So even that's really not too bad considering that this is an enormous creature that lives underground. We're not talking like Godzilla-like catastrophes coming from these creatures. In fact, most of them seem fairly peaceful unless provoked. Now this one here is another one colored by myself. There are a few in here like that. Now this one's fairly creepy in my opinion. A beakless jay, so it doesn't have a beak, instead it has a couple of large lips, which is moderately terrifying, and patchy feathers so you can see a bunch of its skin on its chest and head. And on this one you can actually see its stinger underneath here. That's awful, huh? Imagine a stinger the size of a traffic cone getting rammed through your torso. Nightmarish, really. Now I had again colored this one with colored pencils, and I do like the results, but it took forever. But yeah, I figured I'd give it a try. Well, I just had a disturbing thought. Imagine if this creature made like a sucking sound with its big old lips as it flapped silently through the caves. Just kind of like a That'd be horrible. Then an enormous bus-sized bird comes swooping down, slams into a dwarf, rams its stinger through their torso, making sucking sounds, licking its lips. Oh man, I have too much fun, I'll tell you guys. Alright, next beast. Next up we have Nekhol Gongithmishos, Nekhol Squidbeached, a perplexing name. Nekhol Squidbeached was a forgotten beast, a towering feathered bristleworm. It has a broad shell and it undulates rhythmically. Its cardinal feathers are long and sparse. Beware its webs. That is a nasty looking creature right there if I've ever seen one. Now these bristle worms, if you've never seen one, are truly terrifying creatures. There's this place a few hours away from my house called Cape Cod, and we used to go there for vacation in the summer. And these bristle worms used to live down in the sand. Now if you see the creature, they look relatively harmless, kind of like an earthworm except green, and they do have little protrusions on their sides. But if you agitate them, they have a couple of these little black, terrible looking pinchers that come out the front side. Ooh, and they can get you. I've never been bitten by one, but it looks like they can do some serious harm. Awful, 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 I'll tell you. But Nekhol here can actually spray webs, which makes it a ton more terrifying. And the fact that it's bigger than an elephant does not help matters at all. In fact, it should also be noted that most of these creatures, if not all of these creatures, are much larger than an elephant. I mean, these are truly titanic creatures slithering through the underground. Oof, yeah, that is a nasty looking creature. Ugh. Anywho. Alright guys, I'm gonna tell you what. I think I'm actually gonna cut this episode right here. I had originally planned to do this episode with 30 forgotten beasts in it, but I'm realizing now that it's at 24 minutes. So, I mean, I don't think I can really fit in 15 more beasts in 6 minutes. That would be silly. So yeah, I'm just gonna cut it here. I really enjoy babbling and I don't feel like cutting any of it out, just in case someone wants to hear something like that. So yeah, I'm just gonna cut it right here, put this out as part 1, and then do part 2 between now and next Thursday. And hopefully next Thursday I'll have something else for you as well. A bonus video. Nothing wrong with that, right? Hopefully. Anywho, thank you as always so much for watching, I really appreciate that. A thank you to Mrs. Kruggsmash, as well as to all my patrons without whom I'd have no hope in continuing this, as well as to my composer friends Chris WK210 and Elkbird, both of whom should have respective links down in the description below, and of course respect to you as well. Thank you so much again for watching. I truly appreciate it, guys. And I will see you in part 2 later this week. Hopefully. And until then, you bearded bastards,